yourself to call this number. Let our experts help guide you through the process of negotiating a tax settlement. Call this number or go to tax10000.com.
We all know that movement is like medicine, but getting the movement you need to feel better can be a challenge. Now you can keep fit while you sit with QB, the world's leading compact seated elliptical. QB gives you active sitting, letting you burn calories and keep moving in an easy and low-impact way, all while you work, read, or watch TV. QB was named a top 10 gift by Time Magazine and has been featured all over the world. It's whisper quiet while it works your abs and core, hip flexors, glutes, quads, hamstrings, and calves.
QB is a lifesaver for me.
Here's your answer to your problem.
I feel young again.
Join the hundreds of thousands of people moving more with QB. Call to find out how to get your QB with free shipping and a 30-day completely risk-free trial. You'll also get this QB workout mat free. Now keep fit while you sit with QB.
To order, call 800-289-5820. That's 800-289-5820. Call now.
Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Now we're going to begin this hour in Washington. We're almost 2 months after the Capitol riots, the echoes still being felt. The House of Representatives closed for business today while the Capitol itself continues to resemble a military fortress. This after credible threats of domestic terror again, and they're tied to the lunatics of QAnon. And I'm not making this up, this is real. They thought today was the day that Donald Trump would magically return to power. Now that after yesterday's Senate hearing on the riot, and we have more questions tonight than we do answers regarding the roles that Donald Trump and his top military advisors played in creating the conditions that allowed that riot to happen, and in the hours that went by before finally a response, and the violence that filled the gap in the hours in the interim. Now, it was all summed up yesterday by the commander of the D.C. National Guard.
I would have sent them there immediately. As soon as I hung up, my next call would have been to my subordinate commanders, get every single guardsman in this building and everybody that's helping the Metropolitan Police, remission them to the Capitol without delay.
His testimony yesterday was riveting. There was a back and forth where another Trump official sat there and continuously the general contradicted him on the reality of that day, and as they say, with receipts to prove that the allegations that everything that could have been done, in fact, was not done. So as you saw it played out, you tried to follow along, and the timeline of the course of events is what really changed yesterday with the information, the answers filling in some of the gaps. January 6th. Now, what happened that fateful midday and afternoon? And I want to bring Andrew Whitman in right now with the timeline, because we had a much better picture at the end of yesterday's testimony than we did before.
We did, and as we mentioned on the show last night, these questions and this information about the timeline all came from one soundbite that has prompted all of these yet unanswered questions. The D.C. Guard commander talking about the afternoon of January 6th.
At 1:49 p.m., I received a frantic call from then Chief of United States Capitol Police Stephen Son, where he informed me that the security perimeter of the United States Capitol had been breached by hostile rioters. Chief Son, his voice cracking with emotion, indicated that there was a dire emergency at the Capitol, and he requested the immediate assistance of as many available National Guardsmen that I could muster. Immediately after that 1:49 call, I alerted the U.S. Army senior leadership of the request. The approval for Chief Son's request would eventually come from the Acting Secretary of Defense and be relayed to me by Army senior leaders at 5:08 p.m., about 3 hours and 19 minutes later.
3 hours, 19 minutes. We'll come back to the timeline in a second, but that statement caught our eye and also those of Washington Post columnist Dana Milbank, and his stark question: did the Pentagon wait for Trump's approval before defending the Capitol? And it turns out there's compelling evidence that the answer to that question was yes. You heard the commander talk about the delayed response, 3 hours and 19 minutes from the request for help until that help was approved. Now, there's one more moment from the 6th that we need to add to the mix. After leaving his rally, then President Donald Trump stayed silent on the 6th until he tweeted out a video at 4:17 p.m. In it, he told his followers, "You have to go home now." So let's add that to the timeline of that day. 1:49 p.m., the plea for help from the head of the Capitol Police. Nothing happens. 4:17 p.m., Trump's tweet. 4:32 p.m., 15 minutes later, the Trump Pentagon says the request for the National Guard was approved, but the Guard commander was not notified that it had been approved until 5:19 p.m., which begs some questions. Did the Pentagon wait until after Trump's tweet or some other similar act of permission before they helped at the Capitol? And why did it take so long to approve the request? Why did it take even longer to let the Guard commander know? Unfortunately, the answer to that may have a lot to do with some of the individuals involved. We know that Lieutenant General Charles Flynn was involved in the call in some capacity on the Pentagon end. We also know that the Trump-led Pentagon lied and denied that Flynn was involved in the call when asked by reporters. And we know one more thing about Charles Flynn. His brother is Michael Flynn, Trump's disgraced former national security advisor. Michael Flynn spoke in support of the January 6th rally at an event the night before. And we know from reporting that Flynn was also encouraging Trump to declare martial law at the time and use that declaration to keep himself in power because of the emergency. There's another key Trump player in the middle of all of these questions with the Pentagon, Chris Miller, who was the acting defense secretary on the 6th and in the days before. Miller, who was not confirmed for the job by the Senate, had been a White House aide until his big promotion, which he got after Trump fired Mark Esper days after the election, and he never explained why he fired Esper. After he was installed, Miller did some dirty work for Trump, installing a Republican operative as the top lawyer for the NSA. The Biden team accused Miller of interfering with the transition. So it's not beyond question Miller might have played games with security at the Capitol in that same vein. Miller is the guy whose letter set off the levels of security preparation ahead of January 6th. His letter, as you can see there, is dated January 4th. In it, Miller ties the hands of the D.C. Guard in a slew of meaningful ways. No weapons, no body armor, no interacting with rioters, no riot control agents like the chemical sprays that rioters used against police, and they weren't allowed to seek any help from any units other than from the D.C. National Guard. Miller also required a quick strike force, the first line of defense for Guard units in a position like this, to only be used as a last resort. And there's Miller's big signature on the bottom of the page and just the word acting to indicate the unusual nature of how he got the job in the first place. Miller's role came up during the hearing yesterday, including questions from Rob Portman, a retiring Republican from Ohio who did a lot of coverage for Donald Trump in the last 4 years, but wasn't doing it yesterday.
These are 3 unarmed National Guardsmen who are helping with traffic control, in part so that Metropolitan Police can do other things, and they were not permitted to move a block away without getting permission from the Secretary of the Army. Is that true?
That's correct.
That January 4th memorandum from Acting Secretary Miller to the Army Secretary required the personal approval of the Secretary of Defense for the National Guard to be issued riot gear. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you get a sense of just how the Defense Secretary put himself in this process. That question was followed by Portman asking just how unusual these kinds of restrictions are. The answer? Very.
But still, you couldn't prepare for a civil disturbance without getting permission from the Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of Defense. Is that true?
Normally, for a safety and force protection matter, a commander would be able to authorize his guardsmen to protect themselves.
So something he'd normally be able to do on his own, he had to get the Secretary of Defense, the acting Secretary of Defense.
Listen, you and I watched this. I'm not exaggerating that you don't have to be a political nerd. It was riveting yesterday. I know a lot of people didn't get an opportunity to see it. You could not walk away from the testimony yesterday of the general without lifting your chin off the floor. And Republicans, and you played a great bite there from Portman, but also you had Roy Blunt doing the same. It was unprecedented. 2 days before the riots, before that rally, the handcuffing of that general of the National Guard by the, well, we don't know the White House, but certainly by the acting secretary. It never happened before. He's been there for 20 years, that general that we heard testify. He's never seen anything like this. Now, Andrew.
Reduced the capacities of the D.C. Guard to basically those of the Boy Scouts on that day.
Okay. Now, there were other items that we don't have the specifics of, but we know they happened that could be on that timeline once we get more detail. So between that call at 1 o'clock in the 1 o'clock hour and the 4:19 message that the president put out, we know that the president had a phone call with Minority Leader McCarthy, where McCarthy, by eyewitness accounts, was begging for help from the president because the Capitol was being overrun. And the president said, again from other Republican ear witnesses, well, maybe if you were a better ally to me, like some of those people, meaning the rioters, they care more about me than you do. Right. We also know that the president took time during the riots to reach out to Senator Tuberville, again trying to hold up the certification of the election. And finally, I don't know this, but we do know that Mike Pence apparently was the one who finally authorized it, not the president. I gotta think that Pence, with his wife and child in the building that day, called the president at some point.
You would think so. And we also know that from Tuberville told Trump on that phone call that Pence had just been evacuated. So he knew that Pence was being targeted and was in distress.
And this was in the intervening hours before the president did anything, or his White House, or let alone his cabinet did anything. Now, moreover, Andrew, we learned today also something that we had heard before, that some Republican congressmen, and maybe even senators, when you bring in Johnson to the mix, had correspondence with some of the rioters and their organizations prior to the riots. We now know that as part of this probe, their phone records or communication records are being examined. The question being, in the days leading up to, and maybe even the day of, did any of these lawmakers aid and abet the people who stormed the Capitol in an armed insurrection? The bizarre questions we're asking right now all demand answers because they're legitimate given what we're learning.
And we've heard reports that some of the rioters were given tours of the Capitol grounds the day before, and we know that the rioters knew with alarmingly accurate precision where to go as they were hunting for Mike Pence, Nancy Pelosi, and others.
This is just getting started, Andrew. Thank you. When we come back, the very latest in the allegations against Governor Cuomo and the reaction to his apology for that. A top Albany reporter with the New York Times will join us.
Attention timeshare owners. This is an urgent consumer alert from the Timeshare Exit Hotline, a national company specializing in helping consumers legally get out of their expensive timeshare contracts. We're offering you a way to legally get rid of your timeshare. So if you're fed up with the maintenance fees that keep on coming and want to learn if you can terminate your timeshare legally and permanently, call today. Even if you've tried before and were unsuccessful in getting rid of your timeshare, call today and see if we can help. We offer a complete 100% unconditional client satisfaction guarantee. Make this completely free call and learn how we can help you legally put an end to your timeshare nightmare once and for all. You have nothing to lose, so call right now to qualify and receive a free consultation. You can terminate your timeshare legally and permanently, but you've got to call now. Call the number on your screen today. It's a free call.
Remember when taking a hot bath was the best part of your day? And for some, it can be hard and even not safe just getting in. Older bathtubs can be as high as 20 inches. Let's face the facts. As we get older, our knees and backs start to hurt us. Getting in and out of an old bathtub can be difficult and even dangerous. Jacuzzi Bath Remodel, a name you know and trust, as the perfect solution for you. We call it the tub to shower conversion. We'll remove your old bathtub and the need to step over a dangerously high threshold, replacing it with the safety and luxury of a low-profile walk-in shower. Advanced materials mean no more mold or mildew from an old bathroom, and all this in about a day. As a special bonus to you, you'll get a special extra safety feature for free. So please call now.
This is important news for people who have taken Zantac or its generic ranitidine and then suffered from cancer. Zantac and generic ranitidine have been linked to cancers. Zantac and ranitidine contain NDMA, a known cancer-causing agent. If you or a loved one took Zantac or generic ranitidine and were then diagnosed with bladder cancer, kidney cancer, or any of these cancers, call Davis & Crump right now to see if you're eligible for a cash award and medical expenses. Operators are standing by.
Who hasn't felt protective lately? Of our families, our communities, our resources? In times like these, we all fight to make sure our people are safe. But when your people, your family, your community is made up of millions of cancer patients and their families, keeping them safe takes everyone's help.
The day after Governor Cuomo apologized in the wake of 3 women accusing him of sexual harassment, the New York tabloids, they're not buying it. The New York Post, not surprisingly, mocking the governor, showing a picture of him touching the cheeks of one of the accusers. The Daily News, which is usually more supportive to Cuomo, it had the headline "Crocodile Tears," basically saying he's full of it. The New York Times, a bit more tame, its headline, "Cuomo, contrite over sexual harassment accusations, refuses to resign." I'm going to be speaking with the co-writer of that piece in a second, but first, let's show you what the papers are talking about.
I now understand that I acted in a way that made people feel uncomfortable. It was unintentional, and I truly and deeply apologize for it. I feel awful about it, and frankly, I am embarrassed by it. And that's not easy to say, but that's the truth.
And for more, let's bring in our guest, Luis Ferre-Cedurni. He covers New York State politics for the Times. Luis, thanks. And by now, people are either going to reach their own conclusions or they'll at least wait for the Attorney General's report. But what I'm curious is what's happening behind the scenes. And, you know, for folks who don't follow it as closely, there's limited political seats at the top of the political pyramid in New York. And with both Senators Gillibrand and Schumer not going anywhere anytime soon, there's a lot of Democrats who'd like to be governor right now. How is that playing out in terms of who may join the limited ranks of Democrats who say the governor's got to go? How are political motivations part of this calculus?
Yeah, thanks for having me. You know, we saw leading up to his apology yesterday a small but growing group of state lawmakers who are Democrats. Some of them have been frequent critics of the governor. Others are from more moderate suburban districts, coming out and saying that the governor should step down. In the meantime, I think, you know, the governor's office is probably bracing for potential new allegations to surface and see how they weather that and how those allegations, you know, change the political calculus for some of our top leaders in the state, you know, how they handle the situation.
I was speaking with your colleague Jesse yesterday, and I said, I used to cover Albany pretty closely. When there was a scandal that broke or when there was a huge corruption probe, you know, you had a whiff of it before the allegations came down because you heard through the rumor mill. I got to tell you, Cuomo's been in Albany for 40 years. And, you know, Jesse said he had heard rumblings of this. I hadn't. Doesn't mean that I'm right. But were people shocked at what the allegations that came down, given, not that Cuomo doesn't have a temper, but he's a calculated guy, and he's spoken out on the issue of harassment in detail over the years, and he's held elected officials, I remember when he did this with Schneiderman, to account without any gray area. Were people shocked that Cuomo's name is attached to this kind of behavior?
I think it really depends who you ask. I've spoken to some former staffers who used to work in his office. And while, a lot of them said they never necessarily saw anything or heard anything, they said that they found the accounts of the women that have come forward believable. And these are people that worked on the second floor and near the governor for a few years. Having said that, I think what sparked this, if you trace it all the way back, it was sort of an erosion of the fear factor that the governor had created, right? We've reported about how the governor is known to issue verbal attacks and threats and retribution and the late night calls to lean on someone to get his way. And that we saw an erosion on that when Ron Kim, the Queens Democrat Assemblyman, comes out and gives his account of a threatening call he said he got from the governor. And I think that started to open up the floodgates.
It seems that within the inner circle of Cuomo, that they looked at Governor Northam in Virginia, albeit a completely different set of circumstances. But a year ago, people thought, he was dead man walking politically, and he wasn't going to be able to survive that scandal wearing blackface years ago. But a year later, he's in a completely different place. Are they delusional that time might, fog memories here? Or are they right that, just as long as there's not more bombshells, not only can he survive this, and I saw some polls out today that showed the public still hasn't convicted him in at least the court of public opinion.
I think some people you speak to will say that if there is one politician who might take a page from the Ralph Northam book, it is Andrew Cuomo. I'm sure in the coming days, we're in an important period in Albany right now, state budget negotiations. I'm sure they're going to try to use that to their advantage and get some significant wins out of those negotiations. He's lobbed some popular proposals like legalizing recreational marijuana and whatnot, and they might want to try to point to that to try to change the topic of conversation a bit. Reopening the state, of course, vaccination efforts are ramping up. But again, like I said, I think, and I think you've mentioned this before, there's speculation in New York that if one or two or more serious allegations start to come up, that could start changing the political dynamics. Maybe it could, influence some of the bigger names in the Democratic Party to start calling for his resignation even before we have a state attorney general report.
Obviously, there has been some denials on the governor's part, but he hasn't denied the allegation made by Ms. Bennett. And I'm curious, and there's no way of knowing for sure, but from the folks that you've spoken to that are close to the governor, do they believe that the contrition is because he may have gotten caught, or is the contrition because he didn't really realize what he did was so out of bounds?
I think it's hard to say at the moment. I mean, what is clear is that the women who accused him didn't buy his apology. They saw it more as a non-apology. I will say, I'm sure some New Yorkers would have heard him or seen him and believe that he was genuine, right? You could at times see his voice crack, and this is a governor who is not known to show remorse or regret. And there he was facing the cameras, saying that he was embarrassed and that he was sorry and that he apologized. Having said that, right, you gotta take a look at what exactly he was apologizing for. One thing he hasn't done is deny what, for example, one of his accusers, Charlotte Bennett, said that he said, right? She said that the governor asked her whether she was monogamous, whether she had sex with older men. The governor hasn't denied those remarks. So there are still questions that reporters have and want to ask the governor about the allegations out there. And one other thing that Charlotte Bennett's lawyer, Deborah Katz, pointed out yesterday is that Ms. Bennett reported her interactions with the governor to her supervisor, and there were conversations about how she felt and what the governor had told her. And she got transferred to another job in the administration before eventually leaving. So their lawyers argue that presumably the governor knew about this And they said they're prepared to prove that they didn't handle her allegation, her complaint, the way it should have been handled.
As they say, there's many more acts to this play to go here, but I appreciate your time with us today, Luis. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, from New York, we head down to Texas, where the crisis far from over, with many people still dealing with water issues, massive electric bills now. But could all of the pain and the suffering have actually been avoided? After the break, I'm going to be speaking with one of the top reporters in Texas. He says the answer to the question is yes.
The first 3 months, we saved $4,100.
CarShield saved me over $6,000 in engine repairs.
I saved $4,100 out of pocket.
Amazing, amazing.
Customers everywhere agree. If your car is out of warranty, you need to call CarShield before your car has an expensive breakdown.
Without CarShield, there was no way that I could afford to get my car fixed.
An engine, transmission, or computer system breakdown could cost you thousands of dollars, but not with CarShield, America's #1 car protection provider.
CarShield saved us $4,000. That was great, right?
Yes, it was.
We're just happy with CarShield. They put a transmission in it and a motor. Who does that?
CarShield makes sure you don't have to pay for expensive car repairs.
The components that we're using are not getting cheaper. So nowadays, coverage is even more important.
CarShield covers most makes and models from 5,000 to 150,000 miles.
It's easy, affordable, and no long-term contracts.
And when customers realize that they're getting a $5,000 job for $100, they're excited. I've had customers who were so happy that they did break down into tears and cry.
We saved over $6,000 on a complete engine rebuild of our truck.
With CarShield, I saved over $3,600. It's a no-brainer.
I never have to worry about being taken advantage of when it comes to car repairs.
It's like having a suit of armor around my car.
Cars will break down, and those breakdowns could cost you thousands unless you call CarShield today and get the protection you deserve.
CarShield saved me in excess of $10,000.
And when you call, you'll also receive at no extra cost roadside assistance, towing services, and rental coverage.
If your car's out of warranty, believe me, you want to have CarShield.
Make the smart choice and protect yourself from sky-high auto repair bills. Call now for a free and instant protection plan quote. It's only a matter of time until repairs are needed. And once your car breaks down, it's too late. Call 800-858-4214, 800-858-4214.
Attention. If you've had a hernia surgery after 2006 and suffered from serious side effects such as infection, chronic pain, organ damage, mesh shrinkage, or mesh migration, you could be eligible for financial compensation. Call the law offices of Wright & Schulte right now at the number on your screen, or visit meshjustice.com now. Ethicon, a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson, has withdrawn its PhysioMesh flexible composite mesh from the market. Again, if you've had complications from your hernia surgery after 2006, you could be eligible for financial compensation. We can find out what type of devices were used in your surgery. Call the law offices of Wright & Schulte immediately at the number on your screen, or visit meshjustice.com now. You deserve justice, and the call is free. And there is no fee unless we win your case. Call now for your free case evaluation. Again, call the law offices of Wright & Schulte immediately at the number on your screen, or visit meshjustice.com now.
Greg Abbott wants us to forget everything. He wants us to stop thinking about how cold we were, or how we're going to repair our homes. He even wants us to forget our friends and family who have died, just so he can save his own skin. The truth is, Abbott lied, and Texans died.
That is a new spot released by the Lone Star Project. It's a group that's formed with the sole aim of defeating Republicans in Texas, with Governor Abbott at the top of the hit list. Now, that group is one of many that are now saying that Abbott lifted all COVID restrictions, all in an attempt to change the subject from the deadly power outages and water shortages that plagued Texas for weeks. As we know, Abbott placed blame for that on everyone seemingly but himself.
Many of you are angry, and you have a right to be. I'm angry too. At a time when essential services were needed the most, the system broke. ERCOT repeatedly assured the state and the public that ERCOT was prepared. Those assurances turned out to be false. ERCOT must be overhauled.
And now the CEO of ERCOT has been fired, and several members of the board, they've also been shown the door. I should note here, Governor Abbott, he's also blamed green energy for the crisis, which is, by any estimation, a complete lie. As this chart shows, natural gas, coal, they are the biggest sources of energy in Texas. Wind and solar, those squiggly lines way at the bottom of the graphic. Now, Texas residents, they're left dealing with the mess caused by a deregulated and an independent power grid. Scores of people got hit with bills in the thousands and thousands of dollars as the surge pricing kicked in due to the power emergency. And that's prompted class action lawsuits as well as rounds of investigations. My next guest, he wrote a piece in the Texas Monthly saying the Texas blackout is a story of a disaster foretold. I recently spoke with that author of the piece, Jeffrey Ball. You know, Jeffrey, I just played a soundbite from Governor Abbott, and if you're to believe the governor, ERCOT is the beginning and the end of all things wrong that put Texas in the position they're in. And the argument that blame lies squarely and entirely on ERCOT is beyond simplistic here, isn't it? The governor and others got a lot of looking to do in the mirror.
Well, ERCOT exists within a broader context, I think, as you're alluding to. And Texas made some very intentional policy decisions a long time ago that created a reality in which something like this was likelier to happen. And in fact, then a storm walloped Texas and sort of played precisely to the weaknesses of that system. Texas decided many years ago that it wanted to minimize regulation of its electricity market, ostensibly to promote competition and to thereby reduce prices for consumers, but also, it has to be said, to maximize profits for energy producers. And one result of that deregulation is that Texas pays electricity producers only to produce electricity. It does not pay them, unlike a number of other states and countries, to invest in extra capacity on which they could call if there's a shortage, if there's a storm that knocks power out. And so given that decision a long time ago that electricity producers were not going to be paid essentially to help finance an insurance policy for the state in terms of electricity, there was less of an insurance policy. And when a storm walloped Texas was more vulnerable than it might have been. I mean, I think there are two other quick points to make about the policy context here. One is that Texas also, as a result of this kind of laissez-faire approach, go-it-alone approach, decided that it wanted to have an electricity grid that was more cut off from the rest of the country than is the case in other parts of the country. And so when things happened the way they did in February, Texas had less ability than it might have had to call on power from other places. And in addition, there was a really fateful policy move that Texas did not make. Most people think of Texas as a hot place, but Texas gets pretty cold in the winter. And in fact, there's a history of really horrific freezes in Texas right about now in February over the years, where the electricity system gets walloped and also the natural gas production system gets walloped. And in the wake of one of those particularly bad examples, exactly a decade ago, February of 2011, experts came in and recommended that Texas require energy producers, electricity producers, and also operators of its natural gas fields to winterize their facilities, to protect them, to basically insulate them in the event so that they'd be better able to handle a really bad storm. Texas declined to require that. And again, because requiring that would have raised costs. And the result is that Texas was less prepared than it otherwise might have been had it required people who produce energy in that state to winterize their facilities, like it has to be said other states do.
And to amplify that point, and you said it, in 2011, in February, in fact, almost a decade to the day, they said, listen, this is going to happen again. You got big problems here. As you said, you got to winterize, and you also, they said, have a reserve generating capacity. This was not a mistake of lack of foresight. They were told not just then, but repeatedly throughout the years, you guys are playing with fire here. You have to do something to protect yourselves. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. And I saw even in your writing, in places like Siberia, let alone neighboring states, everybody didn't have the problem Texas did because they were required by law to winterize and also have a backup, let alone, as you mentioned, this idea of go it alone. They were told. They just chose to ignore it.
Well, it's actually almost more interesting than that. Not only is it the case that Texas fared worse than places around Texas, which had different policies, which were more restrictive in terms of their requirements for winterization, but even within Texas, you referred to an acronym called ERCOT. ERCOT is a wonky term for basically the main electricity grid in Texas, the grid that serves about 90% of the state. But it doesn't serve 100% of the state. There's a flank of the western edge of Texas that encompasses El Paso, and there's a flank of the eastern edge of the state that encompasses Beaumont. And it turns out that those eastern and western flanks did not suffer the blackouts that the rest of Texas suffered. And the difference is that the rest of Texas that suffered those blackouts is in the ERCOT grid, which and didn't winterize to the extent that not only neighboring states did, but the flanks of the state did. And so indeed, there was a policy decision. There were warnings that this happened in 2011. And by the way, it happened in several years before 2011. And there was a decision that was going to cost too much. And, you know, 9 of the last 10 years, that was a perfectly fine decision. But in the 10th year, Mother Nature had something else to say, and we watched what happened.
And Jeffrey, it's not just one bad year. There was a conscious decision to not buy into climate change, in that they were using modeling for the way they wanted the weather to be, or historical, not a nod to, hey, we're going to have harsher winters. We're going to have greater gaps in terms of the high temps and the low temps as a consequence of the global changing of the environment. They chose not to do that, and in many ways, this can be a beta case for people who say, keep government out of everything, don't have them regulate, let the free market work its way. When you do that and profit motive is a driver, as you said, you're going to have non-winterization, but you're also going to have people cherry pick the math, and in this case, the temperatures. That was a part of this as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, climate change is a really, really complicated subject. And I think it's really important for your viewers to understand that scientists will tell you that it is not at all possible to link any particular weather event to climate change. So it is not possible to say that this storm that walloped Texas in February is a result of climate change. What it is possible to say, and what scientists say, is that as climate change intensifies, the extremes will get more extreme. And so what ERCOT was doing methodologically is looking back and saying, we're going to extrapolate from the kinds of storms we've seen in the past, a view of the kinds of storms we're likely to see in the future. And it has not begun to integrate into those models the notion that climate change may fundamentally change the future.
It'll be fascinating, Jeffrey. If a year from now, you and I talk next February, if there is regulation, if Texas is still going it alone. And I think, like you, we have short memories. Unless the lawsuits are extremely painful and also through discovery very revelatory, I think only then will we may see some changes, but maybe I'm just a cynic. Jeffrey Ball, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Andrew will join me with the latest when it comes to Capitol Hill, including how Senator Ron Johnson is trying to stall the stimulus bill, even though millions of Americans are hurting, and they're desperate in need of that help.
Help. When you fall and can't get help, you will lie on the floor for hours or days in constant, terrible anguish, which often results in a tragic outcome. But with Life Alert, one touch of a button can get you help fast.
Don't worry, help is on the way.
With any of Life Alert's 3 emergency systems, help can be summoned immediately, whether at home,
I've fallen and I can't get up,
in the bathroom,
I've fallen in a shower,
or on the go.
Help! I'm in the park and I can't get up.
and batteries never need charging. Life Alert saves a life every 11 minutes.
For a free Life Alert brochure, call 1-800-215-6582. That's 1-800-215-6582. Call now. 1-800-215-6582.
If something happened to you, what would happen to them? Their home, their education, their future. You need life insurance, and chances are SelectQuote can help you get it for less than $1 a day.
SelectQuote found Jacob 40, a $500,000 policy for only $19 a month. And SelectQuote found his wife Wendy, a $500,000 policy for only $17 a month.
Our secret? At SelectQuote, we aggressively comparison shop up to 10 highly rated companies to find you the company with the best rates.
We found Gary, 35, a $1 million policy for only $22 a month.
Why pay more? Give your family the security they need at a price you can afford.
Call 800-717-7198 or go to selectquote.com now and get the insurance your family needs.
At a price you can afford. SelectQuote. We shop, you save.
I didn't know some Medicare Advantage plans may pay for dental visits. Did you?
I didn't know some Medicare Advantage plans may pay for transportation to my doctor. Did you?
I didn't know some Medicare Advantage plans may pay to have my prescriptions delivered directly to my home. Did you?
These and more are important benefits some Medicare Advantage plans may give you. So if you're eligible for Medicare, call us right now because you could enroll in a plan with some amazing additional benefits. Call now.
Even with the House closed today because of some QAnon fantasies, there has been a lot happening on the Hill. Andrew's back now with the details.
And Rich, let's start with the stimulus, which Democrats want to pass by a week from Sunday in order to prevent some benefits from running out. Some minor changes to the bill announced by Democrats who need every Democratic vote or some Republican help to get it passed. To get there, Democrats have agreed to limit who will get stimulus checks. People who make $75 grand or less, or couples who pull down $150, will still get $1,400 a person. But the top end limit has now shrunk from $100,000 or $200,000 of income to $80,000 for individuals and $160,000 for couples. Anybody at those limits or above will get no stimulus. Anyone in between will get somewhere between $0 and $1,400 per person, depending on your income. Democrats are also increasing the money that smaller states will get in state aid, figuring that may produce some yes votes as well. Meanwhile, Democrats in the House last night passed an elections bill that reads like a good government wish list, which probably explains why not a single Republican voted for it. The bill would guarantee mail-in voting, no reason needed, guarantee 15 days of early voting, make states automatically register every American adult to vote, give voting rights to all felons, require paper ballots, force the disclosure of dark hidden political donations, require states to use independent redistricting commissions, set standards for election equipment like vote reading machines, require disclosures for all online political ads, set ethics codes for Supreme Court justices, restructure the Federal Elections Commission so it can no longer get stuck ending in tie votes, and require presidential candidates to release their tax returns, wonder who they had in mind. Republicans from Donald Trump to Mitch McConnell to Marjorie Taylor Greene said the bill is their top priority to defeat because, and many of them are saying this out loud, it will hurt their chances of winning elections. Rich?
Senator Ron Johnson's a moron, but he outdid himself today, didn't he?
He really did, Rich. He's requiring that the entire 600-page stimulus bill be read out loud, which is going to delay any votes by 10 hours or more. There's more, though. As chair of the Investigations Committee, Johnson held hearings on Hunter Biden, Hillary Clinton, and lots of Obama officials that produced nothing, but he never held one about Trump. Johnson spent July 4th, 2018 in Moscow, of all places. When he got back, he complained about U.S. sanctions against Russia. Like I said, this is all on brand for him. The worst part of this is that it's not only on brand for him, he worked and voted to overturn election results. He claimed the Capitol rioters were all good people, and there were Antifa members dressed up as Trumpers to blame, all while privately admitting that Biden won the election and calling Trump an A something. That's not good.
Okay. The thing that has really baffled me is politicians, particularly those without a backbone, they can all read a poll. Andrew, 3 in 5 Republicans voting Republicans support this, and more than three-quarters of all Americans support this. Nobody's going to debate people need this, but usually in politics, when you give people checks and you protect people from, I don't know, being evicted or foreclosed on and put food on tables in red and blue districts alike, and give states money so they don't have to cut cops and firefighters, and I can go on here. Those are popular things. I am surprised that not only are Republicans opposing it, and you laid out some reasons as to maybe why, but the way they're opposing it. I think this filters down to the broader public to say, what is this guy doing?
Yeah, and that may hurt with independent voters, particularly in purple states. I mean, you're hard to believe that a Republican voter is going to vote Democratic simply because they didn't get the stimulus or Republicans are opposing the stimulus. So it's not like they're going to offend every voter, but yeah, this is the kind of thing that people will remember. Maybe that explains why there's so much Republican objection to these voting improvements, because that's one path to victory for the Republican Party if they're not passing popular legislation. We're
going to be talking more because there's an important case regarding voting at the Supreme Court, but these would make material changes to the equity of voting. And the states that they're targeting are all states, coincidentally, that Trump lost. Republicans are, from the Arizonas to the Pennsylvanias, et cetera. What's in this bill, if it's passed in the Senate, would really put a lot of the things that the public supports, more fairness into the process.
Well, it would arrest all of the movement to try to restrict the balloting in places like Arizona and Georgia, and it would impact every state in the country. So that would be one big step in the whole thing. That probably explains why Republicans are opposing it as much as they are.
All right, Andrew, thank you. When we come back, we switch gears. We talk about COVID. The numbers, they are going down, thank God, and the pace of vaccinations rising fast. But are we out of the woods yet? Well, ABC News chief medical correspondent, Dr. Jen Ashton, she'll join us after the break to give us some answers.
Are you over the age of 50 and considering buying an annuity in the next 60 days? I have some important news for you. Don't buy an annuity until you understand the pros and cons of annuities. Call now for this free book on maximizing your income in retirement. Annuity Do's and Don'ts for Baby Boomers from leading financial firm J.D. Milberg. That's right, free. This book reveals little-known truths about annuities in simple-to-understand terms. Grab a pen right now because we're about to offer you this free book that unlocks the 5 little-known truths we believe baby boomers and seniors should know before buying an annuity. And it's free.
Call 800-258-6979.
As a bonus, we'll also throw in a free annuity rate report. We researched numerous products and summarized rates and benefits of annuities, all from Sentinel Security Life Insurance Company.
Call 800-258-6979. That's 800-258-6979.
Call. Mary and Shirley both need oxygen. Shirley lost her freedom the day she went on oxygen, but Mary has the ultra-compact Inogen 1 G4 oxygen concentrator from Inogen. It's the smallest and lightest model we've ever made. Shirley is forced to miss out on everyday activities. Mary fully enjoys her life. Shirley has to wait for tank deliveries and worries about running out of oxygen. But Mary's Inogen 1 G4 makes its own oxygen, so she'll always have the oxygen she needs anytime, anywhere. Shirley finally listened to Mary and now has more freedom too. It's time for you to reclaim your freedom and independence with the Inogen 1 G4. Act now to start your 30-day risk-free trial. This is a limited time offer, so don't wait and don't accept substitutions. The sooner you call, the sooner you can say goodbye to heavy oxygen tanks for good and reclaim the freedom and independence you deserve. Call now for your 30-day risk-free trial.
Call 800-462-8146. That's 800-462-8146.
I knew I needed to get a home security system, so I did my research and read reviews on Consumer Affairs.
Protect your home. An ADT authorized premier provider wants to help you feel safe by offering you a complete home security system, free, featuring $850 in free equipment with professional monitoring starting at less than $1 a day. With installation starting at $99 and 36-month monitoring contract for new customers only. Termination fees apply.
Call 1-800-413-6141. Call now.
Finally, I can come to you with some good news when it comes to COVID. We have a third vaccine that's hit the market. The numbers, they're falling from everything from cases to deaths to hospitalizations. But one of the top epidemiologists in the country who has frankly been right a whole lot more than he's been wrong says it is way too early to do a victory lap.
Some of the potential darkest days of the pandemic may yet be ahead. We're back down now to about 80,000 cases a day, and tomorrow that could start climbing again and getting very close to where we were once before. So this next surge with the B.1.1.7 variant is inevitable. And what we're doing right now by opening up our country as we are literally inviting this virus to come to us.
Plus, a model from the University of Washington, which is one of the most widely respected ones when it comes to projections, shows that new variants from South Africa and Brazil could cause this virus to circulate for years to come, unfortunately. This is going to force us to keep wearing masks and socially distancing for the foreseeable future. Reuters, they interviewed 18 scientists who closely track this pandemic, and they all agree with that unfortunately depressing outlook. I want to bring in our guest to discuss, ABC News chief medical correspondent, Dr. Jen Ashton. And Doctor, we got a mixed bag, and let's start off with the good news. The vaccine rollouts kicked into high gear, and I just saw the numbers from the nursing homes. The vaccine's working, I guess from the peak in December. They've seen a 90% drop-off in cases. Some cases, they don't even have any positive cases. That's great news. The vaccine's working, and it's getting out there.
That is such great news, and hopefully the word will get out that people can feel a greater sense that these vaccines are safe and effective, and they're going to be the critical tool in our toolbox in fighting this pandemic and kind of getting back to our new normal, as I talk about in my latest book. But to be clear, the flip side, which I'm sure you're going to get to next, is that now's not the time to take our foot off the gas. We've made some incredible progress, but this vaccine has shown us that we have to stay vigilant, and now's not the time to, turn a blind eye to what this virus can do.
Well, you read my mind, and I know you heard what the president said, calling it Neanderthal thinking, and a big mistake, talking about Texas and now some other states deciding to get rid of mitigation and to leaving it up to businesses to make decisions as to not wear masks, allowing 100% occupancy. I assume you agree with the president.
Absolutely, and I think we've heard from Dr. Fauci, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, the director of the CDC, and various epidemiologists and public health officials, and I agree with it from the data that I look at on a regular basis, that I think it puts people's lives in direct harm to do such things right now. We have to act like grown-ups, and right now there's a big difference between what we all want to do and what we should do. And as the vaccine is reaching more and more people, now is the time to dig deep and be patient and resilient and, aside from the frustration that we all feel about wanting this to be over, to say that, there is hope on the horizon, but not if we behave in a scientific and medically irresponsible way. And the data and science shows us that, packing public places at 100% occupancy without people wearing masks right now is dangerous.
And speaking of the data, and again, I hate being the black cloud here, but the folks who have been so right on this, University of Washington, their modeling has been among the best in predictive. Dr. Osterholm, who I know you've been following as well, they're really worried about what they're seeing with the variants and what they're seeing from the South African model and others here, that this thing is mutating. And while we all agree we got to get vaccines, we're not going to see the end of COVID as soon as maybe even the most optimistic of us hope for.
Absolutely correct. And, you mentioned Minnesota, Dr. Michael Osterholm. He has a great podcast, by the way, that I've listened to every single week for over a year, for insights and expert analysis in this, and who have been tracking infectious disease outbreaks for their entire lives, for decades, and use those models, get our ducks in a row so that we don't go backwards. Opening up at full capacity and taking masks off right now is absolutely not preparing for the worst. In fact, many people say that's inviting the worst.
The vaccines, by any measure, historical or otherwise, they are unbelievably effective. But I have people saying to me, Jen, that, hey, do I really want to take the J&J shot? I'd rather, or Pfizer. Can you put to rest here that one isn't as good as the other?
Or vice versa, right? And I think that I'm glad you asked that question, Dr. Fauci, and I agree with this. There are 3 authorized vaccines right now. We can expect there to be more. All of them are effective. Remember, over a year ago when we started down this path, the FDA, CDC, NIH said they would accept a 50% risk reduction for a vaccine to be authorized. These vaccines are way more effective than that, and 50% would still be good. It would still save lives. So J&J, 100% effective at preventing COVID-related deaths and hospitalizations. Moderna and Pfizer, 94 and 95%. Those are excellent numbers. And right now, my recommendation to my friends, my patients, my family, my coworkers is get whichever vaccine you can get into your arm as quickly as possible because they're all good.
Doctor, as always, thank you for the time.
Thanks a lot.
All right, folks, we are going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll wrap things up and let you know what's coming up for tomorrow's show.
Villains, robbers, bandits, crooks, they're all over your TV screen. But the biggest thieves are behind your screen. I'm talking about the cable companies. They charge monthly subscriptions, fees, rentals, and force you to take long-term contracts. Well, it's time to say goodbye to the cable guy, because now you can watch 4K Ultra HD broadcast TV for free. Introducing Clear TV's new 4K Ultra HD design, the Premium HD. Just plug it into your TV and start watching for free. You will instantly receive top-rated network shows, local news and weather, sporting events, and even Ultra HD 4K broadcast shows, all for free. Thanks to federal government mandate, all broadcasters are required to transmit a digital TV signal through the airwaves. The new Premium Clear TV lets you bypass cable or satellite to bring network and 4K broadcast shows directly to your television. Retract the antenna to keep it small or extend them for maximum reception.
Setup was so easy. I took my Clear TV antenna, plugged it into the back of the TV, and now I can watch my favorite anywhere in the house for free.
We're just off the coast here in the Gulf of Mexico receiving free network broadcast HD TV, receive at home. Basic cable and satellite services can cost you up to $80 a month. That's $960 a year and almost $10,000 over a 10-year period. Watch TV in as many rooms as you like with no additional monthly fees. Stop spending money you don't have to spend. Call or go online now and get your premium Clear TV 4K Ultra HD antenna for only $19.95. It's backed by our 60-day money-back guarantee. Order now and you can add a second Clear TV free. Just pay separate processing and handling. That's a $40 value for only $19.95.
I can't believe I get all these channels for free. Plus 4K Ultra HD, Clear TV is for real.
8 years ago, my daughter called to say she was expecting our first grandchild, but I never heard her say it. So a few years ago, Gina bought me a nano hearing aid. And now I love hearing Ryan call me Papa. And at only $297 for a full pair, they make a great gift for someone you know. Plus, call now and order one hearing aid, and Nano will give you a second absolutely free.
Call 1-800-238-2857.
And that is going to just about do it for us tonight. But a quick programming note. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking more about the new information coming out about the Capitol riot, especially the reasons behind the incredibly slow response from the National Guard. For that, we'll be joined by a former top official in the Trump administration's Homeland Security Department, Elizabeth Newman. Again, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you, as always, for being a part of the show. I'll see you Friday.
This is a